Welcome to the Simply Jesus podcast. This season, we are focusing on what it looks like to be Jesus in your daily life or business. And I'm excited to bring you these inspiring stories. Okay, book lovers, this episode is for you. I have with me this week Melody Trowell. Welcome, Melody.
Thank you.
So Melody has just written her very first book, and it's just a really special book. So I want to spend that time talking about her journey. But I met Melody kind of just, life is weird, but we met like at church at a mom's kind of, party. So we talked just a little bit, but I felt we really met on Instagram.
Yes. Don't we all?
We connected on Instagram, but because of books. I remember that you were sharing these beautiful, unique books, and I would go out and buy them and look at them. But one of those books was The Story of God with Us, which is still like one of my all-time favorites. And I actually read it for one of the podcasts, I think maybe like over the summer, and it was... It's just, anyway, it's a must-have. But tell me a little bit about yourself, Melody.
Well, I'm a mother of three. I have a 14, almost 15-year-old and 12-year-old twins, boy, girl. Been married for 20 years to my husband, Randy. I'm from Abilene, Texas, originally, where I grew up, and been here for the last 20 years. I am an associate professor of English at Dallas Christian College here in town, small Bible college. And that's pretty much me for now.
Yeah. So what made you want to write this book? And let me tell you again, the book is called The Girl Whose Frown Shook the Ground.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. It's a chapter book. It's kind of like a fairy tale.
It's a fairy tale. Yeah. It's got 14 chapters. They're pretty short. It's going to make burgeoning readers feel really good about themselves whenever they can read it to themselves. It's going to be good for moms or dads to read to their kids, teachers to their classes, ages kind of 5 to 11-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super cute. So how did this book kind of come about?
A few years ago, I started reading more and more of the things that my kids were interested in.
Right.
Of course. And that was George MacDonald, J.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis. And I was like, where have these guys been my whole life? Finished reading a George MacDonald novel called The Lost Princess. And this was 2 years ago now. Closed the book. I was working at my son's swim meet and grabbed a piece of paper from the swim meet information, flipped it over and wrote The Girl Whose Frown Shook the Ground.
Wow.
And I had all these ideas. I was also teaching creative writing at the time, so maybe I was just kind of in that mindset. I had never written fiction before. I mean, I tried, but it was never good. This just kind of came out of that experience.
So tell me about, like, what are your goals for this book? I know that there's a thread of just the Lord kind of woven through that. Tell me about that.
It's a story of redemption, our salvation, basically. The little girl grows up thinking she's very special because she has a birthmark, and her parents think that makes her special. So they treat her like she's special, and of course she is. But because of this, she gets very spoiled and gets everything she wants. When she doesn't get what she wants right away, she frowns. Where that came from is a vision that I had in my mind of a little girl frowning. I just saw her cross-armed, and she frowned, and it went so deep that it shook the ground. It bounced the ground around her, and I was like, what is that about? And then I remembered something that my niece had said to my dad one day while they were driving past a new church that had been built, beautiful Catholic church, looked like a castle. And she said, I need to be a princess in that castle. And so I put these two, the vision and then that thing that my niece said, put them together. And I thought, what if a little girl actually did try to do that? So at one point in the story, she kind of tries to do that. Anyways, when at the peak of the story, when she's at her just peak selfishness, she comes across a hollow tree. And as she enters, she starts to shrink and goes inside and meets this helper type character. She's kind of like a fairy-like character, and I call her the helper. And she helps the little girl see, you are chosen, you are special. I see you have this special mark, but you're not quite yourself yet.
Oh.
So let me help you be who you really are. And she cannot regain her size until she learns these lessons of empathy and selflessness.
Right.
Which she does, and she gets redeemed. And then I'm not going to spoil the end, the last chapter, something very, very special happens.
Right. Yes. Oh, I love it. I just want everybody to read it. It is a really sweet book. And like you said, I plan on at Christmas time, I could give it to my son's teachers and, put it in their library and things so that other little kids can experience this book. I think it'll really resonate, with others, because it's not this perfect story of this perfect kid. It's just going through growing up and kind of have some lessons that they have to learn. I feel like this season we're kind of focusing on the fact that we're being really intentional in our places.
Yeah.
And I know that you are a professor at a college, and I feel like you're very intentional there. Do you have some stories of some ways you're maybe teaching or you're approaching what you do a little bit different than maybe a non-believer?
Absolutely. You can't teach properly without loving the students. You can't. No matter if the students are your own children or someone else's, you just can't. So I've been really intentional about that. I do teach at a Christian college, but that doesn't mean that every student in my classroom is a Christian.
Right.
Or knows Jesus or has ever read the Bible. So approaching it from a place of loving them as image bearers has changed the way I don't get as frustrated, as I used to, with, them turning in stuff late or talking in class or being on their phones. Of course it's frustrating, but there's a little more grace there, but grace and truth. So there's the accountability as well. Jesus brought both.
Yeah. Do you have any specific examples of something maybe that happened and how you approached it?
Yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, yesterday. So I've got one student who's been struggling academically, and I could tell that there was something else going on. So I made sure to let him know in front of everyone that he's very smart and to not be scared of that.
Right.
And then sat down with him. He had not done anything all class. In fact, was distracting others, which I think, before I realized how to teach out of that place of love like Christ, I would have just been frustrated and written him off. But saw him for an image bearer and sat next to him and said, listen, I know it's not the academics. What's going on? And he started to cry.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, here we go. Something's happening. Long story short, I got kind of to the heart of it, and there was some grace and there was some olive branching. And then I got him to submit a counseling request at our school.
Good.
Which is free for our students. And often they don't want to do that, so I helped him through that. And it's just to see it in his eyes that I'm not a failure,
Mm-hmm. I just think of how frustrated you could have been, not just in that moment, but for the rest of the semester dealing with a complicated, student, as opposed to taking a step back and saying, okay, Lord, what else can I do? Something is going on, and getting to the root of that. And then not just for you, but for him, like how great that he could actually get maybe some resolution and something, some kind of help with whatever he's dealing with.
Yeah, it's very fleshy, and I say that in Christianese, It's very easy for us, and I've done this many times. I've been teaching for 20 years, so I haven't been very good at this until recently, I guess, but it's very easy to see it for the surface.
Right.
She, whoever the student is, always late, always talking, always on their phone, never turning in work, you're just a bad kid or you're a bad student or I wish he wasn't in my class, right?
Right.
Stuff like that. Once you get past that and see, okay, no, he is made in the image of God. Whether or not he is a believer, I don't know. Doesn't matter. I am to treat him the same way I treat my kids.
Right.
You know? So now that we're halfway through the semester, it's a little bit easier to kind of do that than it is in the beginning.
Yeah. So you said that since you've been teaching for 20 years, you haven't always approached it that way. What do you think changed that kind of switched it in your mind?
Well, age, age, time, experience, prayer. I went through a pretty dramatic heart change, right around COVID. A lot of us did for different reasons. But really, really within the last 2 years, there's been a lot more, edification in my role as a Christian on this earth who has these particular giftings. Here is your lane. Now swim in it.
Right.
Right. So as soon as that got locked in the last couple of years, I was able to walk in more confidence.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So I know that in the past, you've actually had a lot of little side projects per se, a lot of good ideas. But what kind of advice would you give to other people who either want to start a small business or write a book or any of that, when we're trying to be really intentional to step out with Jesus and not on our own?
Oh, wow. Man, you have to pray about it. I've started a couple other things and prayed, but really wanting it to just go my way, and I would say the words like, your will be done, Lord, you be in this. But I didn't really feel it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So obviously pray, but also hold it very loosely.
Okay.
And I'm even doing that now.
Right.
This might be the only book I ever write.
Right.
I'm writing other things, but this might be the only book that sees the light of day. I have no idea. So if you hold it with loose fingers to let God do what he wants with it.
Right.
Your heart will change toward it.
Yes.
And it will be what he wants it to be. And sometimes that might look like what you think it will, and then sometimes it won't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we should measure things differently than the world. And obviously we want the book to do well and to sell well. But my guess is if you had a ton of stories where people were really changed, whether that's a parent or a child, that probably is ultimately the goal, is to know that your writings made a difference.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In the kingdom, a difference in the kingdom.
Right.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's the goal.
That's awesome.
Mm.
All right. Well, I would encourage you to go out and get Melody Trowell's book, The Girl Whose Frown Shook the Ground. I have read it and it is really sweet. I need to go back and read it again. I feel like I read it kind of quickly the first time. But I just want to encourage you to pray and be intentional and to hold things loosely. I think that's great advice when you're starting a new project, and really see what the Lord is wanting to do with it. I really enjoyed interviewing Melody. She is just an amazing person, and I love her story of how she has learned more about the Holy Spirit and has been walking in step with the Spirit. She has stories of some crafting things that she's done on the side and how she laid those down in obedience to the Lord because it just wasn't the right time. So when this story that God just kind of laid in her heart, and she kind of wrote it all down at a swim meet, she knew that it was the Lord, and he just began opening up doors for her to get this book published. She even had an illustrator that she saw on Instagram that she loved and was kind of fairy tale like, and she wanted that to be her illustrator, but typically the author does not get to choose that. But she suggested it to her publisher, and then she was able to have Amy Grimes. Let me make sure I say it right. Yes, Amy Grimes as her illustrator. And so I think it really adds to the book, these fairy tale pictures that are not just on the cover, but throughout her book. And so it's really cute and kind of whimsical. It's really adds to the book. But the point is that Melody has been obedient to what God has called her to do, and she is really trying to walk in the ways where he's pointing. And you can see that in just one story about the student that she was trying to love. I know she has many other stories like that, and it's changed the way that she teaches, because instead of trying to come in with her agenda, she is really trying to say, like, where is God already in this situation, and how can I partner with him? And I think that's one of the biggest stories that we can learn for me and for all of us, is that in any situation, we have our own things we want to do, of course. But if we can find where God is already moving, what is God already doing in that situation? And then if you can align yourself with the Lord, align yourself and partner with him, you are going to see amazing results. And I think that's where we get back to the Lord asking us to do little things for a big result, for a big difference. I think that only works when you're in step with the Lord. So I want to encourage you, whether you have just a 9-to-5 job or you're at home with your kids, ask the Lord, where are you moving? What are you doing in my kids' lives or in my family's life, in my coworkers' lives? And then really try to listen to the Holy Spirit and step into what he's already doing and partner with him. I think you're going to see some really big results, and it'll be really satisfying for you.